Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's live cast. We have myself, Rick. We have Tim. We have a special guest today, one of our good friends. He's worked with us here at GameDev.tv. He's been in the community as a student at GameDev.tv, and he's an indie game developer. Stephen Hubbard, welcome today. We're going to have a look at your game. I'm very excited to hear more about what you've been up to because we haven't talked for a while. So, first of all, what the heck have you been doing the last, 6 months in terms of game development? Have you been practicing?
Yeah, a lot. I took a short stint for the World Series of Poker, so I went down to Vegas and did that for a month, which we can talk about that if we get sidetracked. And then I got back and really hopped into game dev once again. So I kind of go back and forth a lot. I think in the last, call it, let's say 7 or 8 weeks, has probably been the most I've worked on game dev in like a single chunk period. I've probably actually focused and worked on game dev related things upwards of like 40-ish, 50-ish hours a week, let's say, in the last 2 months. So I've really been enjoying it, really into the swing of things.
Let's get some parameters. So when did you first start saying, okay, I'm going to properly learn how to use, I know you're a Unity guy. I'm going to learn this Unity. I'm going to properly do it. How long ago was that? And how much time have you spent? And how many practice games have you made? And how many proper games have you made? Just so people get a context of, how your journey lines up with their journey.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people will be able to relate to this. And I've probably talked to you about this before, but maybe never. So I'm 34 years old now. I think the very, very first time I launched Unity, I was like 21. So I touched it. I took like a couple like YouTube tutorials. I did it for like 2 weeks with one of my buddies, and I was like, we're going to learn this. Did it for like 2 weeks. And then, of course, like many other people, it just fell to the wayside. I did it for 2 or 3 weeks, did a couple tutorials, made like a really simple, like snake wormy type game. And I was like, that was really fun. And then didn't touch it again for 10 years or so. I was working kind of in the finance and playing poker a lot, but then finally wanted to learn programming and web development. So I actually went to one of those local boot camps in Salt Lake to learn web development for basically like 12 or 13 weeks. Paid, my chunk of cash to kind of go do like an in-person school thing, learned kind of like the basics of web development. And then for whatever reason, just downloaded Unity again because I was like, oh, this looks really fun. And I actually pulled up my GitHub this morning just out of curiosity on when I first downloaded the Unity 2D and 3D beginner courses. And it was almost exactly 2 years ago, just over. It was like 25 months ago, where I found, I think like so many others, hopped on Udemy, Googled like Unity tutorials, GameDev.tv tutorials, and courses had just a ton of high reviews and a lot of students, and hopped right in. And that was, I guess, the start of leading up to finding Unity. And then in the last 2 years, it's been a whirlwind.
Well, that's really cool that you working over the course of 2 years part-time, like I've watched you have plenty of time away from it. It's not like every day you're working on it. We're going to have a look at a game today that you've been recently, I want to say completed, but I'm not sure where it's at in terms of completion, but a game you've been working on. So other folks can look at it and say, oh, part-time on and off for a couple of years, I can get to that point. And if you were doing this absolutely full-time, then you could have reached that point, after 6 months perhaps. So I think that'd be cool to have a look at.
Yeah, I was looking at, because I'm pretty good about committing and pushing everything to GitHub, largely just kind of for my own history of having everything and just kind of good practice. And if you look at my GitHub, I'm very hot and cold with it because I have a couple other projects that I'm working on in my own personal life. And so I'll do like game dev really hard for like 1 to 2 months at a time. And then I'll take 1 to 2 months off. And then I'll do game dev for 1 or 2 months. And in the last, I've probably it sounds surprising when I say it out loud, but I bet in the last 2 years, I've created probably close to like 24 different games. That's including like the games, like the RPG course with you and Sam.
You do game jams at all?
Yeah, and I've done, I think, 3 game jams. The first one I did, it was like, I was brand new to game development. It was probably like very close to 2 years ago, and it's still up on itch, and it's like a relatively fun little cutesy game. I think it was the GMTK game jam. It was like called Out of Control. I think it was like 2 years ago. Did that. And then the last 2 that I did, I actually think are like pretty good. as far as like having 1 year's worth of experience. Haven't done one recently, largely just because I kind of feel like the natural progression that I wanted to follow for game dev was, I did the 3D, the 2D, and the RPG courses with GameDev.tv, lots of YouTube tutorials, like half of Code Monkeys or one of Hugo's courses, 3 game jams, lots of prototyping. And then about a year ago, Rick and I worked on a project for GameDev.tv called Skill Builder, which also was a really good opportunity because it gave me the chance to create, I don't know, somewhere around a dozen little mini games that we could build kind of little mini courses off of, more prototyping, a couple different games where I was like, okay, this is the game that I'm going to work on until I quote unquote release it. They fell to the wayside, shocker. And then finally I feel like for me personally, I'm finally to the point where I know enough about all things game dev that I'm hoping that I think I'm finally to the point where I know that I can really wrap my head around everything, bring it together, and actually quote unquote release a relatively polished product that people can enjoy and actually have some fun with.
I'm interested.
You started learning pixel art in there somewhere too, right? Started messing around with that stuff.
Yeah. I think 2 years ago, the last time I did any kind of artwork was, a decade plus. I was never the type of kid to like doodle in school, so I've never really been what I would consider an artistic person by any means. But somewhere along the way, I even took some Blender courses from Grant Abbott, which are incredible. Didn't really stick too much to it because I kind of just wanted to learn the basics just to kind of understand what it was all about. And then started learning pixel art, and I'm getting better at it. I really enjoy it because I think they complement each other. Pixel art is something that I think balances really well with programming, largely just because I don't think I'll ever have the capacity to create like an amazing dragon in Blender and create like some amazing looking 3D game. It's probably not within my capacity, but I do think if I work and practice on pixel art for, years, 3 to 5 years, I think by the end of that 3 to 5 years, I'll actually have some like decent looking art. And I think even the art for this game that I did is not bad. I think it's
Did you do the art for Tilecraft?
Yeah, all of it. All of it, but the logo.
Let me show a screenshot of it real quick because people should see this. It looks really the thing I always look at when I see game art is like how coherent does it all look? Like each individual thing can look good, but how coherent as a whole does it look? The color palette on this is amazing, and it all kind of matches really well. As soon as you sent me this link and I saw the screenshot, I was like, I want to play that because it's like It looks good. It looks like it looks very. It conveys what it is really well from a screenshot. A lot of games,
And
especially
maybe
3D games, don't do that a lot. And it's good to see.
And maybe if folks in our chat are interested, so if enough people say yes, please, then maybe we can convince Stephen to have a look at his Unity build of the game. I don't know if you've got it ready to do that, but just have a look at how it's laid out and organized. I find that fascinating myself, just as here's how I make things, but how have you done it? So maybe we can have a look at that if the folks in chat are interested in doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Stephen,
I don't know how to share my screen, but I have it ready whenever we're ready to do that.
Okay, yeah. You
There's
just
a button in the middle
you get your
bottom.
phone and you point your phone at the screen, and then you just link it. We'll talk you through it. It's all good.
Perfect.
I have a random sort of question, Stephen. I know that you've invested in game learning, like learning how to make games, and then you've taken some time off and then back into it and time off. How have you seen the progression of that kind of stop-start? If you were to say your skills were at, for example, 50, we'll just give it a number, and then taking a month or 2 or 3 or 4 off, did you see your skills and knowledge go down to 10, and then it took you a month to get back to 51? Or it was, no, after a couple of days I got back to 50 and then it gave me a boost, I actually got up to 60 or 70 because of that break? How has that break affected you so that others can calibrate their own, I've been away for 3 months, should I even bother getting back into it, it's going to take so long?
Yeah,
journey?
That's a good question. I haven't given a lot of thought to it in my own personal experience, but now that you ask it, I feel like I can answer it pretty well. I can't recommend enough that at the beginning, you don't give up. Meaning 2 years ago, if you work on it hard for, let's say, 1 to 2 months, but then you kind of put it by the wayside for 1 to 2 months, which I did, and I don't really I guess I kind of even honestly regret it. I come back after 2 months and I'm like, I don't even remember how to get a component. I don't even remember, like, I don't know the difference between like a component or a game object. And then you have to like relearn all of those really, really basic things because you just don't even have like any kind of solid foundation. Now I feel like, so the first time, let's say we use that number of like, I got up to 50. Well, let's say I got up to 30 and then I took 2 months off and I went all the way back down to like 5. But then you go all the way back up and you get to 40, and then you only go down to 20. But now I actually feel like I'm at the point where I feel like if I was to take like, let's say 1 to 2 months off right now, I could come back. And if let's just arbitrarily say I'm at like an 80 right now, I'd probably only slip to like a 75. I don't think I would forget a ton, but those first few months, probably like if it was me personally, like that 3 to 6 month period, I think if anyone was starting out, that's what I would recommend, to really shovel and push through those first 3 to 4 months to really build as solid of a foundation as possible so you don't have to start over.
Even if it's minimal time investment, because it kind of keeps it in the RAM of your head and you can kind of, keep that learning going. And two, it compounds over time too. Because one of the things I find that beginners find really frustrating is they'll work a month or two on their thing and they'll have like a menu and like, like barely anything on screen, and they're not really proud of it, and it's very discouraging, to get something that's not super cool done after a month. But then fast forward 2 years down the line, you've got something like that you made in a month that looks absolutely amazing, and it just takes the acquisition of skill over a long period of time and a lot of practice and a lot of understanding, and even just refinement of skill, right, of like understanding scope and understanding all these different things that come into account with all this stuff. You need it, and it's super discouraging and scary in the beginning, and I think a lot of people quit too early.
And it doesn't end, meaning the imposter syndrome never ends. But I try to really keep myself in check. There was actually a post on the Facebook GameDev.tv group like just a few days ago where someone said, alluding exactly to the same thing that you just said, Tim, but I responded, one thing that keeps me in check is just to look back at how good I was at game dev a chunk of time ago, 6 months ago or a year ago. And if 2 years ago, Stephen could see the game that I'm, about to release today, I think he'd be like really proud of it. Now, today's Stephen, I pull up Reddit and I just see all of these amazing game dev posts and I'm like, who am I? Like, this is amazing. So, but I really think if I continue building, and working and practicing, I think in another 2 or 3 years, there's a good chance that I might be that person, and eventually get there. There's, and I think I have kind of a clear plan on what I want to do next, and maybe find like a small team of like 3-ish people to like build something out to just see where that goes.
It's a whole nother learning experience too.
Yeah. And like, I want to learn a multiplayer game. Like, I have a bunch of things that obviously I want to do. And actually, I wanted to ask you guys some of those questions as well when we get to the appropriate time on what you guys think someone like me should do next.
Yeah, I think what you should do, sorry, Tim, I was going to say what you should do immediately next is we should have a look at your game.
Yeah, a lot of people in chat are asking for
it. If you want me to share, or you can share.
I will share. Let me make sure I share the right screen. Share screen 1. Click.
Yes. And so if you start from the start, and folks can go grab this. Do we have the itch page link somewhere? So Stephen's got his game up on itch, and you're also releasing on Steam in the next, whenever Steam approves your page. Is that correct?
Yeah, the plan, it's probably realistically, so I've probably worked on this now for, let's call it like 5 weeks, probably very close to, if I just had to guess, I probably worked on it for about 200 hours, meaning about 40 hours a week for 5 weeks or so. Right now, if Tim has the itch.io link that he can share somewhere, there's a free version that you can go download. It's a bit buggy because it's still a work in progress, and it's actually the version from about a week ago. So even a lot of the bugs that exist in that version are all there. And then the big question I'll ask after we kind of play it again, the main goal is I am planning on hopefully like 2 or 3 weeks from now, releasing what is close to the final version on Steam. But if if now's a good time, I'll just kind of at least hop into it just so kind of people
Yeah.
can see where we're at.
Show us around
Yep.
and tell us.
Can you click hide on that little button that's just down at the bottom there? That's through Restream shows that you're sharing your screen. Great, thanks.
Always annoys Rick.
So,
Get the buttons out of the way.
Tilecraft. So isn't this a cool like main menu? I think it looks pretty cool.
The name's really good too, dude. It's a solid.
If I share music, is that going to be like, and share music and sound effects, is that going to be obtrusive to the stream?
I don't. Audio doesn't come through usually, yeah.
Unless you figure out how to do it, in which case it'll make Tim and I look awful foolish, but very excited that you figured it out when we couldn't.
Yeah. Oh, so I could. I'm trying to decide if I want to turn the tutorial on or not. I'm actually just going to take 5 seconds to turn the tutorial back on just so people can kind of see that and turn that little debug thing off that I have. And then we can kind of pop into how I have this set up.
That's actually something I want to highlight too, because I've played a lot of games. I've played a lot of games from newer devs. I've played a lot of games from seasoned devs. And one of the things that across the board a lot of people miss is usually a tutorial of some kind, usually that onboarding process. And it's super important. And games are significantly more complicated to figure out than most people realize without some sort of onboarding process. And when I played this last night, I was pleasantly surprised that it kind of walked me through the whole experience.
Yeah, and you know what? I think it was only about 2 weeks ago. I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, you guys did a podcast that I was listening to, and it was all about Tim was talking about really leaning into how indie game developers can basically take a simple idea and just really lean into it without making it overly convoluted. And Rick then said something along the lines, and it was actually incredible timing because I was literally listening to the podcast building my tutorial, and Rick said something along the lines of everyone hates tutorials. I don't, I'm not putting words in your mouth. I don't remember the exact verbiage you used.
Sounds like a jerky kind of thing, I would say, Stephen.
and I was like, oh, God, yeah, I freaking hate tutorials too. Like no one likes playing tutorials. And so I went back and kind of fixed a couple of things immediately to just try to make it just more naturally intuitive. So I tried to make the tutorial as simple as possible, and it still needs a little bit of work. But without further ado,
what you've done well, Stephen, that I like is I've played the game for about 10 minutes just to be like, okay, what's my first impression of the game? I played it without reading anything, and I was doing okay, but I can see on the side there's some information about what I should be doing. So I think you've and your game allows you to do that. If it's a first-person shooter, it's a little bit harder to do that. But basically, here's what I'm suggesting you do with the hints and the clues and the tutorial. But you don't need to listen to me. Just go about your business. And it's not a pop-up that gets in the way of what you're trying to do. It's an extra bit of information. I think that's a really smooth way of having that tutorial because I feel clever. I'm like, I want to figure it out, man. I want to figure out your game. Don't tell me how to do it.
And I had another one of my friends play the game just kind of like while I was watching, and I was just kind of taking a back seat. And I think most gamers are the same way. Like they see the tutorial and they're like, I don't want it. So especially as an indie game developer, you have to make things, I think, as intuitive as possible.
Yeah. Well, you have to hook them before they want to learn it, right? And I think that's what your type of tutorial does is I played exactly the same way as Rick. I kind of intuitively tried to figure stuff out first. And then I was like, okay, I don't know what to do. And then the tutorial was right there. And I was like, okay, let me go through that real quick. But then also the to-do list on the right side, that's a beautiful way to kind of set that up too, because you can figure out a lot of stuff without actually reading a bunch of text.
So what are we doing in this game, Stephen? If you can just give us a little rundown, and folks can go check it out and download it and play it themselves if they're interested. Although wait until it's on Steam so that you can, even get it again on the thing. Are you selling it on Steam, or are we telling everyone to go get the freebie when you like?
That's the big question that I'm going to ask you after we give you the game demo. So I'll ask you that question in 5-10 minutes or so.
Yes.
I want your guys' input on basically if I should release it for free or if I should release it for $2 or $3.
Right.
I kind of wanted to have a conversation about the pros and cons on like why someone might do that.
That is a good conversation. And if anyone wants to go download it from itch, they can weigh into that conversation as well and let us know how much would you pay for this game, and what needs to be added to it to for it to be that you'd pay more.
Yeah. So the game is essentially heavily inspired by a game called Stacklands, which you guys
I
have
knew
probably
it.
heard of.
I was gonna say that, dude. I knew it. I felt it. I felt
Yeah.
it in this game.
I have no shame admitting
yeah.
that.
No, that's great, dude. That game is awesome.
It's very
and this
cool.
game captures some of those same. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just got really excited.
Well,
so I was
I'm gonna
literally about to
interrupt
ask
as well.
you that.
Tim, that was beautiful. Have you guys ever seen that spelling bee competition where the one kid and he gets in the other kid's face? He's no. He's like, they give him the word and he's like, I know this one. He gets so excited. That's exactly the same joy that you had just then.
I'm sorry.
And then he got it wrong. But anyway,
I literally played Stacklands for so long, and I was like, I want more stuff like this. When I played your game,
I thought it
got
was like a really
vibes.
unique idea. And even as you guys can kind of just see me slowly playing through it, it's basically like a card tile based kind of simple, very casual.
Oh my
RTS.
God. You just basically said, you Googled what would make Tim Rustwick so excited. You're like, cards, got it. Tiles, got it. Strategy, got it.
Stephen and I have very similar tastes in games. Like we went back and forth on card games.
I see. Stephen made a game I like, therefore he's got good taste in games.
No,
I see
Rick's taste in games is a little...
So
tell us about this
game.
game,
Stacklands too much. You know, the whole game is basically exploring this kind of island that you can navigate around. And we won't get into it far enough to really see, but basically the further away that you are from the center of the screen, the more rare resources you'll find. So, you know, maybe like way off here, there'll be like a slightly stronger enemy and there'll be some like oil or just different, more rare resources like a treasure chest or things like that. And so the whole game, you're basically following this to-do list of this encyclopedia that you get different items, and you basically will discover recipes through this farm, which is essentially just gathering XP every few seconds, and every single time this XP bar fills up, it will discover a new recipe and you get to build that. So that core game loop just keeps growing and growing and growing and giving you more recipes all the way until the very end goal is essentially you build the final piece and you win the game. I think for most people, their first playthrough takes about an hour or so to beat the game where it's currently at. And it's definitely scalable in the sense that, like, if I wanted to just keep growing the game and build more things, you could do that. But what really happened, and I'm glad you like Stacklands too, Tim, because I really enjoyed it, is so basically almost exactly 2 months ago, I basically set out and I sat down and I basically was like, okay, I am going to go play a bunch of indie games with the goal of discovering, just kind of brainstorming some ideas. Like Rick has said in other podcasts and courses before, like I went into a game playing session over the course of like a day or two and just played like 10 different games. And the goal was to basically learn from them. Like I was just getting as many ideas. So I found Sock Pop and I found Stacklands because I really like these guys at Sock Pop. I've played 5 or 6 of their games. And they're fun and pleasant and casual. And I played Stacklands, and not only was like, I was like, oh, this game is really fun. Like I love RTSs. I'm a huge StarCraft, Warcraft, Dota fanboy. So any kind of RTS I'm a huge fan of. And then having this like casual card game RTS where it kind of had this unique mechanic. Not only was it really fun, but I was like, oh my gosh, like it kind of hit me. I was like, I think I'm a good enough game developer that like I could develop a game like this as far as having the skill set, you know, having like the programming ability and the artistic ability, not necessarily like the game design, you know, because I think that game's really clever and I did my best to kind of put my own twist on it, but it's very heavily inspired by them. And that was like a really cool moment for me where basically I played that game and I was like, oh my gosh, I think I'm a good enough developer to build something like that. And so I played it for a few hours and then immediately just was like, all right, I'm just going to go start building what I kind of have in mind. And this is essentially what I came up with.
How much iteration did you do on the design? Because this design, this is why there's two things that associate this with Stacklands. One was the moving stuff, the dragging and moving stuff. Well, the color palette too, a little bit, but specifically it was the
color palette. Did you ever
design?
Yeah, the color palette. There's another game by Sock Pop. It's called Tile something. It's like a 3x3 square. What's the name of that game? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. The one where you move the tiles in kind of.
Pulling up my Steam real quick. It's not that important. It's called Tile Tale. So hopefully this is okay for me to say out loud. But I basically also had played Tile Tale, and I was like, I really like that color palette. So I literally just took a screenshot of like Tile Tale.
That's what
two different games. Yeah, I just took a screenshot because I'm not a great artistic person, and I basically just took a bunch of colors from that tile palette and was like, "This is the tile palette I'm going to use." And
It looks
the
good.
art
I don't know why it
style,
looks good. So take the colors, right? Like exactly.
I
yeah,
think colors is a great thing to borrow from other places.
Yeah.
That's not taking IP. That's like learning from the best kind of thing.
Yeah.
yeah, and I
So
have to
you're
do that.
so you're placing the icons, and that turns into like they're a representation of the thing. So if you have a farmer person and you drag them onto a tile, then there's an activity that takes place on that tile. You're harvesting, or you're building, or you're collecting, and then that produces more tiles. So you've got resources building up. I like the fact that it's all very clean with your UI up the top. You've got in the top left a thing P, which seems like coins or monies or something as you're collecting stuff. Is that right?
Yeah, like the very top left, the XP little bar.
Oh,
So every single
XP.
time,
Sorry. I didn't read that
and
properly.
if you kind of really, if I zoom in on this, you can kind of see every single time this will flip up and kind of give you 1 XP. And the whole
That's
core
why I
game
thought it was
loop
money, because the coin came flipping out of the top of the house.
Yeah.
But okay,
So
XP.
originally, for anyone that stands, I probably flew a little bit too close to just like the copying before I put my own twist on it. So I had money, just like Skylands had, and I also had a very similar food mechanic at the very beginning, where you basically had to. But that was actually the only thing I didn't like about Stacklands, is at the end of each day, you basically had to have enough food to feed your workers, and it went through this like kind of what I thought personally was like an annoying mechanic where it like paused and was like, this worker.
Yeah, it
And I was like,
interrupts
"All right,
your kind of
scrap it."
chill.
Yeah, it's just like screw it, forget food. But I had already had a bunch of food in the game, so now you can actually take the food, drag it onto a worker, and it'll feed them. And if you were to feed them, if you look in the bottom left, 2 more food, it'll essentially level them up, which I can kind of do while I'm doing other things. But the whole core gameplay loop is, if you look in the to-do list and or your encyclopedia, which you can kind of customize if you want to filter it out in a couple different ways. And you basically say, okay, I need 1 stone and 1 flint, and you can use the tooltips in the bottom left if you need to kind of use that as a guiding help to basically build things. And you put 2 things on a tile, you put at least 1 worker, you can put more and it'll go faster, and it will, like Rick said, build the next thing, and you just kind of keep going. If you were to play a little bit more, you pretty quickly get to the point where you can build some archers and knights, and you can go and kill these enemies, and that's essentially adds another level and aspect to the game. But the core game loop, without getting playing it too much, is that. And I think it's actually a really enjoyable, peaceful game. I think I did a pretty good job with the sound effects. I made probably only a third of the sound effects myself. The other 2/3 I either downloaded from some open source or open game art, and then just plopped them into Audacity, which is another thing I've tried to learn over the last year, tweaked them to what I thought was good and clean. And then the one thing that I paid the most for is I paid a Fiverr composer like $350 for the original music track, which I wish actually everyone could hear right now, because it's perfect.
Super chill. It's super chill.
It's perfect. I sent
zone out.
I sent the composer the Islanders soundtrack, and I was like, make me something just like that. And then this is what he sent back, and I was like, that's perfect. We didn't even do any like more iterations or anything like that. And I thought he did a really good job with the music.
You know what? We haven't talked about Fiverr a lot here in terms of finding people, but it's starting to grow, I think, as a really reliable place to find people. The rating system, I think, is reliable, and you kind of know what you're getting on there, and it's easy to find someone to do whatever it is that you need. So you're talking about sound effects or composer, pixel artist, any kind of stuff. I think Fiverr is a great place for people to look at. And it doesn't, you're saying a few $100s. You don't have to go with someone who's a few $100s. You can find a composer that is $100 and see what they come up with. And so I think it's a great place to get that continuum of, I just need a thing and I'm not good enough to do that thing, or I don't want to do that thing myself. So, Fiverr is definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, and as an indie game developer, that's my own personal goal, is I kind of want to learn more or less everything to do with game dev, but music. I just think that's like its whole own animal.
Yeah.
It just seems like this whole other thing that would take another 10 years to like even get remotely good at.
Right. And it's
And
so
so-
important that like
Yeah.
bad music can literally take you out of the game, you know.
What was
Yeah.
in your project with the code or with the project organization or the architecture? What do you think is the most complicated aspect of your game architecturally?
Yeah, good question. I'm going to close this out now just so we can kind of like maybe poke around a little bit about how I have this project
Yeah.
set up.
Is there anything you can do to make it bigger? I can't.
Is the resolution too? I'm just
Need to
actually
put on my binoculars to see. You could in Unity, it might require a restart, but I did see recently they didn't used to have this, but I think you can increase the scaling now.
I'm going to do something that I think will work. And
You
if
just
it
change
doesn't
the resolution of your
then we'll
monitor.
all make
Yeah, even one more notch if you can
Did
give it
that
to
help?
us. Yeah, can he give
the-
you any more,
the-
Captain?
like-
Scotty, we need to push it. That was the worst Star Trek
Push.
ever. Sorry, Tim. I know you're huge into Star Trek. And
does
it's
that
all you
look
live for.
okay?
Yeah. that
Yeah,
looks good.
yeah. Can't see the game now, but that's okay.
Now,
We're
like
looking
at
the
least you can
project.
kind of read.
Got all the stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, we can
probably
also
won't
we can
load
also
the
get
game
rid
up
of
again.
these. Get rid of these schmucks over on the side here. There we go.
Cool. Yeah, so I think a lot of people are probably pretty familiar with Hugo or CodeMonkey, and probably the most in-depth or kind of most challenging aspects of this project was the grid system.
Yep.
I actually think in the GameDev.tv course that Hugo put together with GameDev.tv, he talks a lot about the grid system that he also has on his YouTube tutorials. And that took me a while to set up. I'm kind of struggling to figure out how I can show this through Unity.
Did you use tile map? Is it all laid out on a grid? Is it a big array with 0,1, 0,2? What's the general layout? Do you have a
I think
scene
that would
view that
take a few
has
minutes. I could turn back.
all your
on
scene views
those
just
settings.
blue screen, are they?
Can we actually put I feel like I need to use my hands to explain.
All right, we'll get your hands back on there. We'll do it this way.
Because I feel like it would probably take me too long to reset up my debug lines. I'll open up the code just so we can kind of look at it.
I'll move us if we get in the way.
Oh, perfect.
Or in the way.
But it is the latter. You basically said a couple different things. It's not using a tile map at all. And this has been both a good thing and a bad thing overall. But every single time you upload the game, everything is just randomly generated. So this is the scene view. Look at it's beautiful. It's just absolutely nothing. Nothing actually is going to appear. I think I actually have it all hidden, so I'm not even sure if this is going to work. But nothing will even really appear in the scene view. There we go. Until I hit the play button. So the entire grid is a grid setup that basically is, and I'll probably not say this exactly the right way, but it's a generic grid class that is using basically bools to signify if there's a tile occupying that specific grid spot or not.
Right.
And I think that's a really good way to set this up. I think I could have gone away about it in like a couple different ways, but I actually wanted to push and challenge myself to try to do it in a little bit more eloquent way. So that's the way that I went about doing it. And then the intermediate beginner programmer Stephen took over. So there's just a lot of, if you look in the hierarchy, every single tile, if I can kind of click on it, has different transforms for where the workers go, where the resources go. On the tile script, there's probably way too much info that needs to be as a serialized field or public to be displayed, because that's kind of just a bad programming habit that I have. Then there's the crafting manager. The crafting manager was probably the single most difficult thing that I had to come up with myself. Let's see if I can find it real quick. Or basically on the tile, you have to if there's a fiber of wood and a stone to build a farm, and that is a possible recipe. Well, let's say there's like 100 total possible recipes. So how does the script know if it's a valid recipe or not? That was probably the hardest thing that I had to figure out. I don't know exactly. I think it's going to be like right here, maybe.
what I hear about what you're saying, which I really like as well, is you jumped on YouTube or you went into a course, you found a structure, you found some information, you learned from that, you tweaked it, changed it. And I know CodeMonkey/Hugo is great for tile stuff. He's got a lot of that out there, and turn-based type stuff as well. So you got that, and that got you going, got some ideas. And then there was another bit that you needed to create yourself, and you got it, you just did it. And is it the best way in the universe to do it? Who knows? And I think there's a little bit of who cares. And this is really, really important for anyone watching now. It's just because CodeMonkey can do something a particular way, it doesn't even mean that he's doing it the best way or the right way. He's just doing it a way. And if you get something to work, maybe there's 100 combinations. If you add another 5 things, it might go to 5,000 combinations and your system will fall over. But that's okay for now. At least it's working and it's going, and you've got a game and you've got progress. So I think it's super important not to stress about trying to do it perfectly.
I think every game dev and programmer falls into one of 2 categories, which is overly optimizing and trying to make things too good, or just like plowing through like terrible spaghetti code. And everyone's somewhere in that spectrum. I'm like way over to this side, which I think for an indie game developer for where I'm at is probably an okay thing, because I'm not the type of person where I just like get stuck trying to optimize something for hours on end. I'm like, okay, this is terrible, but I at least got the output that I needed, and it's fine, and I'm moving on.
Over-optimizers don't usually launch games.
Say that again?
Over-optimizers don't usually launch games, hardly at all.
Yeah, I think so. I'm really happy that I'm on that side of the spectrum. It has bit me in the butt a couple times with this project. To even give one really good example, super newbie mistake. I honestly kind of even feel stupid for admitting this out loud, but I have these workers, these knights, and these archers, and for whatever reason, when I first came up with the idea to have them, I had a worker class and an archer class and a knight class, and each individual class had their own health component and their own attack component and their own worker efficiency component, right? And their own classes and their own scripts is what I meant. And it's just terrible. At the beginning, I was like, it's fine. But now, in the last few days, I'm almost done building my own saving and loading system, which has been probably the hardest thing that I've ever had to do, as far as programming is concerned. But it's almost done, and I think it's going to work. I definitely didn't do it in the best way, but it's almost done. And that really bit me in the butt, because every single time I needed to tweak either an archer or a worker or a knight, I had to go do it 3 times instead of just having one shared population class that they could all share together.
Yeah. Well, that's the difference between an experienced programmer and a less experienced programmer, is you've made the mistakes. So next time you're like, oh, not going to do it that way again.
Yeah.
And it's often not more complicated than that. You haven't learned a spectacular technique. You've just learned what was frustrating for you. I'll do it differently next time.
Yeah. And this is probably, if I stand on my 2 years worth of experience as a game dev pedestal, I've learned so much more in this project or any game jam project where I've had to just really struggle through bugs and issues and figure things out a little bit more naturally. When I first did the 2D game dev beginner comprehensive course, and I did the little tile things and the Tilevania, the simple platformer, it was you're done with it and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm amazing. And then you go try to do it on your own and you're like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. And so having a project like this, where I've actually had to work on it consistently now for a couple 100 hours, I've learned so much. And I feel like the next project that I build is going to be even just better, at least from a programming standpoint. It might not be the best game idea, but the game structure will be a lot better.
Yeah.
Stephen, would you mind walking us through how some of the procedural generation works?
Yeah.
From a design aspect?
Yeah, let's do it.
Because this is something people ask a lot, and it's also one of the things that has no right answer to it, right? So
yeah, I wish, is this almost too big? Can I zoom this out a tad? So I don't even know how to zoom out on VS Code.
Yeah, you control minus probably takes you out a tiny bit.
All right, that's good enough.
That's still readable, yeah.
So the answer to that, Tim, is a lot of brute force. Like, it's not set up in the most eloquent way. So I basically, if I bring back Unity for just a second, I just have a world generation class that's just one of these many managers that I have as mono behavior classes, which I think is probably more of a beginner way to do it. But that's the way that this project is set up, and I think it's fine because it works. And I basically have a world generation manager somewhere in here. I don't know exactly where it is. And it has this class that basically just starts creating things from top to bottom. So as soon as the class starts, it generates that middle tile. And I actually did it this way. So it essentially generates that middle tile, and then it generates the 4 directly around it. And I did it that way because I always wanted to have a wood, a stone, and a fiber right next to the center tile just to get the player going. And most players will probably never even realize that, but that's currently the way that it's set up.
So
and
real quick, just right there, that is the difference between random generation and procedural generation. A lot of people say, I'm going to randomly generate, and they just put completely random. And in a resource-based game like that, you cannot do that. So that's a really brilliant move right there.
Yeah, because originally it was completely randomized, right? Like then I played a couple games, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I can't find wood. Like that's a problem.
It's random. No wood on the entire map is possible.
Yeah, it's like if you play a game of Settlers in Catan and you're like, oh my gosh, all 5 wood tiles are right next to each other, which are the most fun Settlers games, as we all probably know. And then once those 4 tiles are around the center tile, it basically just starts creating tiles from inward all the way kind of outward. And I originally was going to do that because just like Stacklands, I was going to make it so you could basically buy tiles. And so every single time you bought a tile, it was going to like randomly place a tile like around the center. And so basically your map was going to slowly grow, was the original idea. And so I had that original code set up. So I basically was just like, well, I'm just going to do that, but I'm just going to iterate it, 300 times to just create 300 tiles. And it actually creates this really beautiful, see if I can just show it real quick, like this pretty beautiful, like randomly kind of generated scene. So if I very quickly, I think I can hide all the clouds. Yeah. So
wow.
See if I can make it slightly bigger. Yeah, which I think is actually really pretty. So it just kind of randomly, every single time you were to play the game, it would just randomly create from the inward outward, if I'm saying that the right way. And the furthest, and it starts from the center. It spawns all of basically the way that I have this set up. If you look at the script. Oh yeah, it actually does that. So it'll spawn the most rare items on the outside first, and then the less rare items, and then their items in the middle. So there's like 3 tiers worth of items essentially. And then if we're talking about spaghetti code brute force, it finalizes, and then at the very end, I have this simple function that basically checks to make sure there's at least I think it's like 15 copper and there's at least 15 oil towards the outside. And if there's not, it just kind of like brute force plops them in.
Yeah, that's good. That's, you know what? I have designed probably a dozen different procedural generation maps, and I end up with systems exactly like yours most of the time. Because you have to put that stuff in, especially in resource-based games or things like that. Random just doesn't work. It never works. And you have to, that's why they call it procedural, because it's very procedure based. It's iterative. It kind of works on each part of the map. So that's cool. How do you determine whether the tiles are missing or not? Is that just a random percentage?
Perfect. Yeah, great question. Because as you can imagine, there are definitely more eloquent ways to do this. I remember about a year ago, I created this like mining project, kind of like Terraria, and I can't remember the name of it, but there's like, maybe you can help me. It's on the tip of my tongue. It's like, I think it's called Perlin Noise.
Yeah, Perlin Noise.
And you basically generate this like heat grid map, and it creates like different biomes of different places. Well, I think that would make the most sense as far as like hypothetically, if this was a really eloquent way to code things. But I didn't do that for this project. So you can imagine the way that it's programmed, if it starts in the center and just kind of all the tiles build out, the holes, like as you were asking, it originally was really full, because the way that the code is laid out, it basically just found most nearest random block. And so it would be too saturated towards the middle. Right. So then again, Stephen, just with his intermediate programming skills, one of the later functions basically I don't know why I named it this, but it basically just creates holes all across the map. And so I don't even remember how this function works, to be honest.
You just delete stuff, can't you?
I basically just delete stuff. Like I just go through, and I think I'm just brute forcing. Like I think I just choose a random number, and I basically just fire array cast at like each tile point, I think is what I'm doing, and it hits the tile, and then it just has a 1 in 7 chance of being deleted.
Yeah,
and it kind of creates this
great,
really
dude.
pretty. I think it creates this really like pretty cool design. Like, you know, every single time you were to play it, I'm gonna have to hide the clouds again. You know, it'll give us a unique build. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, that was one of the things I noticed when I played it, because I spent so much time building procedural algorithms like this that like I notice when there's like extra chunks of blocks that are missing or something like that. I just noticed that stuff because I built it so many times, and you had a really nice even distribution of it, and I thought that was really, really cool. So I knew you did some kind of iterative thing on it. A lot of people think procedural generation is like super crazy, like you got to study algorithms for 12 years and get your PhD in this, and really it's just like make a bunch of stuff and then change a bunch of stuff and then change a bunch of stuff and then delete some stuff. Yeah,
I mean, unless your name is Sebastian League, like you're probably gonna do something like this.
Yeah. So let's talk about launch and price and cost, and what your thoughts are in that regard. Whoops, wrong button.
Please.
That's not what I was after.
Yeah, so here's the question I have for Tim and Rick and the audience, whoever's listening. So I had to pay $100 for the Steam release or whatever that is, which is the first time I've ever had to like apply for like the Steam developer things. I've never released anything on Steam. I paid, I think it was $340 for the music. And then that pixel logo on the main screen, that's the only artwork that that's almost the only artwork I didn't do. Actually, there's one piece that I just bought off Itch for like $5 because I was like, oh, that looks cool. I'm just going to plop that into my game. And then, so that tile was also a couple $100. So that means I've sunk in $650 into this game, which is totally cool. Mm-hmm. That's great. The main purpose of this game was to get something under my belt that I could release on Steam and say, I built that. People can go play it, and I can just say I have a game on Steam and kind of like knock that off my belt buckle. So now the question is, you know, I'm not naive enough to think that this game is going to sell tens of thousands of copies, or even if it sells more than 100, I'd be kind of surprised. Or even if more than like 100 or 200 people download it, I would be kind of surprised. And so the point of this game is not to make money. I do want to do that someday. I do, hopefully 1 or 2 years from now, I hope to release a game for a few bucks and have a few thousand people download it. That would be really, really cool. That's not the goal of this game. The goal of this game was kind of a learning process. And so now the question is, do I just release it for free on Steam to just kind of give the chance to, you know, as many people that want to play it can play it and get 1 hour of enjoyment out of, you know, maybe 2 hours max? Or do I sell it for $2.99 just to kind of like recoup a little bit of what I put in? And I just kind of wanted to kind of pick your guys' brain on the pros and cons of that and just kind of see what you thought.
My first question, before I think Tim's going to have a good idea of prices, my first question is, how much additional time are you willing to put into this project, into this game? You know, you said you've been working on it for a couple of 100 hours. How much more time would you be okay putting into it? And that impacts I think the money question as well.
Yeah, that's a good question, because I actually think this game is pretty fun. Like, I think the core concept of the game is pretty good. And I think if hypothetically I was to put in, let's say, another 1,000 hours into this game, basically just building out, like fleshing out a ton of content, you know, like you could go to different worlds. Like, you know, you beat world 1.
My question specifically is, how much more time can you tolerate? Are you sick of it, or you're like, no, I still enjoy it, I'd be happy working on it? Or do you look at the code and you're like, I want to vomit, or I'm out of here? Because that's once you get to that point on your game, it's like, okay, don't commit to another sprint on this. But where are you at?
Well, you know me well enough that you already know.
I know you well enough. That's why I asked the question.
The audience doesn't. So Rick knows me well enough to know that the answer is I'm sick of it. Meaning, like, I just want to get it done. Like, I'm almost I think I'll finish the saving and loading system tomorrow, most likely. I'll probably have to do some it'll probably take longer than that because I'll probably run into a bunch of bugs I didn't know existed. And then I have a couple other bugs to fix. I've had a few playtesters that gave some really good feedback. I can probably put in another week's worth of work to just kind of balance things a little bit better and just kind of get basically the core state of the game where it's at. Meaning to answer your question very plainly, I think I have the personal patience to put in another couple weeks, a few weeks into this game.
Yeah.
And then I just kind of want to move on.
So the last thing I would say, Tim's itching to, sorry, Tim, just one last thing is I think if you were to add in one more mechanic, which was a fail mechanic, then you could have replayability of the game and people could go from, I kind of did it and saw it all in an hour to I can't, when the timer hits whatever, or when I get to a certain amount of XP, or when I've done a thing, just take one thing, don't make it super complex. It could just be a timer. I haven't been able to finish it yet. I'm going to try again. So you get that excitement. And timer, you might ruin the whole peaceful, tranquil thing. So it could be a certain number of turns or a certain number of clicks.
Or different game mode.
I have 3 different ideas that I actually think are all pretty good to have some kind of fail condition. Because you're right now, 0 fail condition. You actually can't lose the game. It's more just a matter of how long it takes you to beat it. And at the very end, once you beat the game, and I could make this a little bit more clear somewhere in the game, but it gives you how many days it took you to beat the game. So each day is 2 minutes long. It takes most of my playtesters, the first time they play it through, I've noticed it takes them about 15 to 25 days. So about a little less than an hour to beat the game. And I've considered doing a leaderboard. So it's the whole point of the game is to actually see how fast you can win. Another big mechanic that I think would actually scale really well with the game, but it would add a pretty complex layer is, eventually just have enemies that attack. The further and further you progress in the game, the stronger and stronger the enemies get that start actually coming in and destroying your stuff. In Stacklands, that's kind of what they do. They have little enemies that pop around and you have to build a little warrior card or whatever you build to basically kill the enemies, because if you don't, they'll go through and eat all of your other cards. So I could do something like that. I could just do,
and that could be based on how far you expand as opposed to how much time has gone. So if you want to slow play and take your time, that's okay. You're not being rushed by day 12. I need to have had all these armies. But the game can know, okay, you've expanded or you've unlocked a certain thing or you've got a certain recipe. Now's where we're going to get crazy. So, yeah. Sorry, Tim, you've been wanting to jump in a few times.
I've got a lot of things. I have a lot of things. I have a lot of feedback too.
Get off your chest. Here we go.
So for the game itself, what you guys were talking about, I think there is a certain player type that likes Islanders-esque experiences where you can't really lose. You just kind of do as much as you do. So I think if you were to add a fail mechanic, I would put some kind of survival mode or chill mode in there. And so have that option there, because what you have, I think, really resonates for a certain player type. And I know that because I've been looking literally for a game exactly like this for months, on a personal level. Me as a gamer, ever since I played Staglands and a few other sock pop games, I've been actively searching Steam with every keyword I can find to find games like this. I really enjoy this. And I can't find anything. Yeah. And it's funny that you made something like this, because the first thing I did when I played Staglands is I started prototyping. And I came up with a similar concept where you drag and drop stuff, but it was on a farm and you're basically planting stuff. And I was like, dude, I want this to exist. So that being said, 100% sell this. Do not give this away. And I say that for 2 reasons. One, because I think this game will actually do well. I really do. I think you should keep your current expectations of, selling games is hard, marketing is hard, and you may not make anything.
And I have zero
expectations.
This is my marketing.
What?
I don't plan on doing much marketing other than this podcast, which is okay.
It's good to have low expectations and then maybe be surprised in the future. But I really do think this game can do well on Steam. So that's number 1. Number 2 is,
how did you get this far in the game? Is this?
I've been twiddling with it while you've been talking.
Oh, that's so funny.
I just left these 2 guys producing XP. Yeah, I think I exploited it.
Yeah.
I'm listening to you, and they're just doing stuff. So yeah.
I had like
Yeah,
3
but
people
yeah, open
stacked
up
in
the
my XP.
encyclopedia again so people can kind of see that this actually, it wasn't in super like programmatically hard to do, but it took a while to figure out how to like
UI-wise.
build this correctly.
Yeah.
You know, like having things that
Cool.
you can like click on the UI and kind of drag
Right.
around and
Oh, it puts them on, turns them off. Interesting.
yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah, a
Tim,
lot of
you
the
were-
feedback I had was actually just around the usability of things. Like, I wish I could, at the top bar, I wish I could drag resources off of there rather than right click and then
pop them out.
yeah, like
Yeah.
so
I
like
actually-
little tiny things.
Totally. I actually that's probably the only thing on the game that I gave up on. I probably
I get it.
tried to do that for like 2
I get it.
hours because I want to be able to just like, okay, I need a fiber. I just want to click it and drag it and
Yeah.
just plop it. But I actually
Yeah.
spent like 2 or 3 hours like trying to do it, and I was like, okay, I give up. Like
And
I
dude,
honestly couldn't figure it out.
It's a good kind of philosophy to have, because the other part of that too, the flip side of that coin, is that right click to pull resources out is consistent across all the stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's more a matter of just learning that mechanic rather than like it's not the
Not too
the
bad.
first
Yeah,
thing
I don't hate it. It just took me a moment. I'm like, why
Yeah.
can't I get it? Then I'm like, well, you've showed me right click works. So I think that's okay that it's
That's one of those
consistent.
like 80-20 things where it's 80% of what you need.
Very
and
quick
20%
small
of the work.
question. If you have any items on your screen, Rick, just like drag like a bunch of something out. Have you found the hotkey just naturally, intuitively to just plop them into your storage without dragging them?
Have I found a hotkey?
Did you find that, Tim, when you played it either? Okay, so
know.
if you hover over the storage at the top, and this needs to be fixed because kind of like see, this is already not intuitive enough. All right,
You know what I tried to do? I tried to double click them.
So, okay, thank you. That's what I was curious about that.
Yeah.
And then, so right now, if you hold shift and left click them, it will actually automatically go into storage.
Hold shift and left click. Oh, okay, yeah. I didn't know.
But
that.
You know what,
I
dude?
probably
This
should just do
entire
right click.
game doesn't use a keyboard
Yeah.
at all. The
But I
whole
think
game doesn't use a
probably
keyboard.
I could just do right click because I think people will naturally right click items like eventually, and they'll see it go into storage.
Yeah, I think that's making it like that, and also making the whole game usable with just the mouse, I think, is part of the magic of it.
I think left click to move and right click to, like, if I click it again, donk, it goes up into storage.
Yeah,
that would make sense for me.
I'll do
Yeah,
that.
so I mean, the reason I asked my question, Stephen, is I think this is great. It looks very professional. It looks like it's complete. I've purchased games that look and feel with this amount of polish and completeness for $10, $15, $20, depending upon the amount of game that there is in it. A little while ago, a couple of months ago, Tim and I were looking at, I forget the name of the game, but it was just a simulator where you can just build little towns. There's no game. You just kind of put a town and it's kind of, I forget how much I paid for that, but it's kind of, it's a nothing game, and it was fun for about 5 minutes. And I'm like, oh, that was okay.
Yeah, I know the game. I did the same thing. I was like, oh, that looks like a really cool game. And so just like literally, just like Tim, whenever I wake up on a Sunday morning in my pajamas and I'm sipping my coffee, I always pull up Steam and I look for games like Islanders or Stacklands, just something that's like something I know that I can get 2 to 3 hours worth of enjoyment out of for a few bucks, but it's like pretty casual and I don't have to like go through this like huge learning process like I would with Banished or Stellaris or something like that.
Yeah.
So
close.
I don't remember where I was going with that thought.
Well,
but
yeah, I mean,
you hit that genre, man, and that is an emerging genre. I just want to say that. And this is, I've highlighted this several times. I've had Stacklands, I've had a few auto battlers and stuff like that on the live cast, specifically because it's a genre that I'm increasingly getting interested in. Because as my kind of brain workload kind of goes up with work and all the other stuff, I want games that require less kind of cognitive load. I want games that are more chill. And these kind of games fit really well in there. And so 100% you should sell it for sure.
Can I ask a question that's driving me insane? Why can't I build this cube?
So if you open up the tooltip thing, this part's not a little bit intuitive. Open up the tooltip again in the bottom left and scroll over it. The iron in the bottom and the top and the to-do list. Scroll over it again like you just did. One more to the right. Oh, it doesn't actually Oh,
I
that might be
struggle
a
with
little
this
bug.
too. I think you need the refinery or whatever.
You need
right?
the furnace, but
Yeah.
that's not intuitive enough.
And
Oh,
that
yeah,
if
furnace.
just had the furnace icon there, I would have got it a lot faster.
Like
So,
I
like,
have to do, because this for me looks like a potato, but I can see now maybe it's gold.
Yeah, it's
And-
like it's supposed to be in like an iron block. So now,
Oh, so I have to. Ah, okay. So there's just a
Yeah.
couple things like that that I think, for your 2 weeks of that was my question of how much time do you want to put into it? Because you're going to find people, once you charge money for something, people are going to be like, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that. You have to do this. Bugs and UI issues or UX issues are pretty important. But they're findable and solvable. That's pretty easy. If you just had that furnace, I would have figured it out. So that's all cool.
yeah, I think
I
even
eventually
if
did.
you just like scrolled over it and like a little furnace icon just like appeared
Yeah.
next to it or something,
Yeah.
it might be that probably hopefully would be enough.
Oh, okay, that's been, I swear to God, it's been bugging me for about half an hour while we've been
Yeah.
chatting. I haven't wanted to derail
actually-
the stream, but just derailed it asking that thing.
Yeah.
Can I chuck a whole bunch? Oh, I can.
You can
Can I
stack
get them all? Anyway, I won't.
Yeah, if
I
you
won't
actually
send it
shift
to,
left click them even. Yeah, there you go.
Right, yeah.
I liked
Um,
that stack dragging mechanic too, by the way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which Stacklands does the exact same
I
thing.
also don't mind doing the click, click, click. If there's a part of the game where you have 100 of something, that wouldn't be all that
Yeah,
good. But
you never really need more than a
it's
few.
quite
at a
quick
time.
to just be like, look how many things I've got, shove them in
And
there.
you actually
job done.
can shift left click them again in the
Yeah.
to get them all out of the storage at the same time.
I think it's good not to go keyboard because then at some point,
Yeah,
I know I was going to say you could turn it into a mobile game, but right click, left click, that'd be a different challenge for someone else that you outsource.
Yeah,
to.
one of my friends was like, "This would make a really good mobile game," and
Yeah.
I think it could be fun. I just feel like
would.
there's too much on the screen to like,
iPad game, yeah. Be cool.
iPad game, yeah.
because it would be right.
You
would
can
actually be
zoom, though.
pretty
You can
easy
pinch
to
and
just,
zoom.
Like,
So
it's pretty
this is
easy to like, drag things around on this iPad.
let's do a little bit of like user research on the fly. This is the only reason that we invite people along to watch our live streams live so that they can be our guinea pigs for these things. There's no other reason. Just joking. How much do you think Stephen should charge for this game on Steam, assuming that a couple of the bugs and issues are ironed out and maybe there's something that you can get more than an hour play out of it? That was why I was talking about a fail or even a completion. It doesn't have to be a fail. To Tim's point, he might not want that urgency. 2 different modes, that might be a bit too much scope unless you can figure out a good way of doing that and it doesn't add too much scope to it. But for me, if I could play this for 10 hours, for example, which I could play this same mechanism, and if I got to a point like, I ran out of this, or I didn't do that properly, or the guys came and, okay, I'll start again, because that was kind of cool. I like the start again bit. I could see myself playing this for 5 or 10 hours, just, because it's fun and interesting and relaxing and learning all the combinations and strategies. And if I'm playing it for 10 hours, I'm more than happy to pay $10 for a game, that's giving me that sort of experience. So you were saying before about you spent this money and you had this input. I think pricing your game is not about the work you've put into it, but it's always about the experience or the value that someone gets from playing it. And this is the mistake people make when they work on their game for 3 years and they're like, great, I'm going to charge $1 bazillion because look how much time and money I've spent on it. It's like, yeah, but I don't know. People don't care how much time you spent on it. So, I would, Tim, over to you. Is it $5 or is it $9? But I wouldn't do $2, my friend. I think people then will look at it and think that it's.
I was gonna do
No,
$2.99.
That's too low, dude. That's too low.
Don't do that.
Maybe I could
If
do
it was
like
a mobile game, you'd have no
$4.99.
choice. You'd have to, but not on Steam because someone.
You should
sees
look at some of the
$3.
games that are $2.99 and they're not even in your league. Okay.
Yeah, maybe I should just do like $4.99. And I'm actually like kind of like pulled back a little bit. There's a few people in chat saying they'd pay like almost $5 to $10 for it. And that's like almost like bringing a little tear to my eye because that's just like so it's kind of really cool to hear.
It's a niche game, man. And the thing about niche games is I think the people that are looking for them will pay extra because they can't find them anywhere else, right?
It's also sorry, Tim.
Well, that being said, I think I talked to Jonas before Islanders went out, and I actually said they should raise the price because we were talking about price, and put it on 5, and I said,
Yeah.
dude, you should go 10 or 15, man. This game
Isn't
is
it?
awesome.
Hasn't it always been like
And
5?
he launched it for 5, and that game blew up. And so I was like, you know what? Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. Maybe they
Yeah, and it's hard
had
to
the
like
right
compare
idea.
myself to these other great games like Islanders, because I actually love it. I've probably played Islanders for 8 or 9 hours. Like I really, really enjoy it. And it's hard for me to like justify selling this game for $4.99 when like Islanders is also $4.99.
I'm more into this game than Islanders at this moment.
It's fun. And so I'm even like honestly talking to you guys, and honestly just like seeing Rick play my game right now is really
He's having
cool.
a good time. He's
The
chilling.
dream come true for all of us, Stephen.
This was the guy that taught you Unity, and now
Dude, that's
I'll stop it.
If
Don't
I just
go
like
there.
brought back
Don't make
the
it
whole,
weird.
yeah, if I just brought
No,
back
man.
like the whole 2 years, and I saw, 2 years ago, I saw Rick playing my game 2 years in the future, that would just be like the coolest thing ever. But one thing I really wanted to say, I read it on Reddit actually, like a couple weeks ago, and it really stuck with me, where it was something along the lines of a quote that was, people don't judge your game based on your efforts; they base it on the result of like what the game
100%.
actually is. Like people don't give a crap about how much blood, sweat, and tears you put into a game. They just don't. Like they just want to play a fun game. And
Oh yeah.
You guys were just saying the same thing. Like, and I think it's saying the same thing in a different way, that gamers that like me wake up in their pajamas with a cup of coffee in the morning and want to play a game for a few hours. They don't care that the developer put in 3 years worth of work or 2 months. Like as long as the game is fun, that's all they want.
They don't care. I
Honestly,
really
as
don't care how
well,
long this took, as long as the dollar for value ratio is good.
I think what we can all, as indie game developers, what we can take out of your journey, Stephen, and what we're looking at on the screen is, for me, the type of game developer I am is I'm searching for a moment. And you've heard me talk about this a lot, searching for a moment where someone can play the game, get really into it for 1 minute and be like, that's cool. I had a really enjoyable 1 minute. What you've created here is a really enjoyable 1 minute that I've now been playing for an hour. So that is, nothing else matters. None of the other, how did you get to this point? How did you structure your thing? What's your knowledge? What's your background? Where did the art assets come from?
Yeah.
I don't think any of that matters. The real true search that we're on as an indie game developer is find the moment, find the experience. So you've given me an experience where I'm feeling clever because I'm figuring things out. You've got a to-do list here, but you're not making it too obvious. That's great. I'm like, okay, that's a ship, I think. I wonder what I do with that. I don't know. Put it in the water, maybe. And I'm figuring it out. You're letting me figure this stuff out, which is awesome, man. That's the magic in the moment you've created. So irrespective of how much gameplay there is or how long I can play it for or any of that kind of stuff, the fact that you've found the moment, fantastic. Now it's a question of how much more time do you want to put into it so that you could not just find the Tims of the world who love this sort of game and the Ricks of the world who are going to listen to Tim crap on about it and go, fine, I'll give it a try, and then be like, I actually quite enjoy this. But you're going to find the other folks as well who are on Steam and be like, oh, I've heard good things about this, or it's got good reviews, or, oh, look, I can do this or that, and fit some of those other game experiences that they're into as well. So, well done for finding a moment. Thanks for sharing with us how you went about finding that moment so we can see it, and giving everyone a really good example of you don't need a million things in your game. You just need someone to sit there being like, okay, I just want to be more. You guys talk amongst yourselves. This is fun.
Well, the other part of that too is as you start to explore, and I won't spoil it for Rick, but you can get rid of some of those clouds. And as you do that, you find more and more interesting stuff. And it's really fun to explore the recipes, but also explore the territory and find stuff that you don't know what it does. And that discovery is super, super fun and interesting. So, I mean, dude, if I saw this on Steam right now for $5 or $6, I would 100% buy it. Like,
I think
even if I didn't know you.
Like if it was polished and if once the save and load system
as it is, I would buy it.
Well, it is polished now. This is enough polish to absolutely launch the game. So yeah, although maybe we're using the word polish in different ways. So.
And honestly, it was in the back of my mind, and I think it's a pretty unlikely scenario. But honestly, just having this conversation with you guys as I kind of try to bring the whole conversation together for my experience, it's gotten me really excited about this game too. Because I've been kind of fading on this game a little bit because I haven't really talked to too many people about it. And it's kind of like the whole life cycle of a game, right? Where I'm kind of in that, like, you start building a game and you're like, this is really cool, and you're like, oh, this is crap. And now I'm kind of like, it's okay, it's okay. But then I talk to you guys, and everyone seems to have pretty good feedback whenever they play it, and it makes me almost it makes me really torn on if I want to keep working on it, like, and implement a couple of those ideas that we talked about with, like, maybe game modes or potential failed conditions or more content. So what I was even like pseudo planning on was releasing it close to as is, work on it for a couple more weeks, like we talked about. And if it has any traction, like, at all, like if it has any traction that people are like, oh, this is really fun, but I get a bunch of comments and feedback of like, I wish there was more.
Right.
I could totally see myself being like, well, crap, I'll just work on it for another few months and release some like free DLC of like more content. Like, I have no problem with that.
That's what Stacklands did. Like, they waited for it to blow up, and then they released the island update.
It's a great model. Yeah, absolutely. And you can price it at, whatever, X dollars, $8, do a launch sale of whatever, $4. People can see it's priced down. As you put more stuff in it, then you roll it back up to that $8 or whatever it is, 4 to 2 or 20 to 4, whatever the numbers are. But you can then say mentally, I've got a place for it to grow up to from a pricing point of view as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good plan. I'll stew about with it in my mind for a minute, but I think I like that plan because that gives me kind of some flexibility on, like, I can quote unquote finish the game, at least for like my own peace of mind, to getting it on Steam. And if it has any traction, sweet, let's do some free DLC and like work on it for another few months. Like, that sounds like a good plan.
I would also say, Stephen, it's really cool. Thanks for sharing with us your how you think about these things as well, and a little bit talking about you get to a project and you're just sick of it and done with it and you don't want to work on it anymore. I personally find that to be the hardest part of game development. I think the three of us having this conversation are pretty good at generating ideas and game design and doing some prototyping and playing around with some mechanics and learning a few new things. We're all pretty good at that. And I think we've all three of us seen that the hard part is once the joy of discovery goes away and the necessity of content comes into play. Because then it's like, okay, I just need to go and make another 10 of these, or I need to go and add another 5 of these, or I need to go and, shoehorn this feature into stuff that already, it doesn't quite fit, and change my code and refactor, and I need to go get some more assets. And I think that's the part that is a very, very difficult skill to not just learn, but also to get that, to find in yourself, how do I push through that? How do I get the technique to go from, I'm kind of ready to give up on this, to, no, I've got to David Goggins this stuff and just dig deep. I don't know if anyone knows David Goggins, but I'll keep my language family friendly and not go full David Goggins. There's a little bit of time where you need to get there and say, if I put another 2 months into this game, my dreams might come true. And that sounds a little bit Disney, but what I mean by that is you might get the 1,000 people play your game and buy it. Not because you're doing it to earn a living, but because you get the validation of, I did a thing, and 1,000 people said, damn, this was awesome. And I think that's the food for the soul that I think is really important, that you'll miss out on if you let go of this too quickly. Tim and I both love it, so you've got great feedback from that point of view. When you start selling it, people are going to be like, I want more. So I think that's where you say, cool, I'm halfway through the marathon, I'm going to dig deep on this. And that's my, my feeling of this particular game. And anyone else out there who's got a game at this particular stage where a couple of people have said to them, this is really cool, that's the time you're going to knuckle down.
Yeah, I think I slightly agree with Rick a little bit, just because I think I've been sort of over cliffs like you have, Stephen. You're kind of describing the initial excitement of a game, the full rush of like, I'm making a thing, and then you make a cool thing and it's like super exciting, and then it starts to wane a little bit. And I think there's a point when you lose the motivation and you lose clarity, and it does happen about a month or two, or 200 300 hour mark is right around when that happens. And the problem with that is if you go too long, you can start to lose clarity, and you could start to say, I'm not feeling this. It's not as fun as I thought it was. And then you're like, well, what if I just add this system in? What if I add this system in? And I think it's really easy to start overcomplicating things. Yeah. It's really easy to start adding in too much. It's really easy to muddy up that beginning UX. You know what I mean? And I think it seems like you still got some of the clarity because this project has been so quick for you, and I think that's a fantastic place to put it. I think if this idea has legs, let's like say it does have the potential to go viral. I think it has potential in this state. You know what I mean? Like if the market wants this game to exist and will support it like that, I think it'll exist in this early state, and then you can add stuff onto it, right? I would release it earlier rather than later and add stuff and
get it out there get it out there and get your butt on the line, because people are playing it saying, I paid you $5 for this. Where's the such and such? And like, oh, okay. I think it can be a little bit painful having your customers saying, you know, hey, give me the thing you promised me, but it helps you get it done. And you know what? Hey, Stephen. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say that was the other point is going through this process and selling a game does wonders for like yourself as a game dev. It gives you a bunch of experience. Like you've got a bunch of experience programming and all that, but going through the sales process and the Steam process and all that is another skill set that you can level up while you're doing all this.
Yeah. And two things that I just wanted to chime in with real quick. To echo what you guys were saying, because it's been about a month now and I've had so much fun creating this game. And then in the last few days, I've done nothing but basically watch tutorial after tutorial. I actually have gone back and watched some of the RPG courses with Sam on saving and loading, because it's the first time I've ever really, I downloaded Easy Save off the Unity Asset Store, worked on that for like a day before I was like, okay, this is not going to cut it for this game. And it might, maybe I was just doing it wrong, but I basically, the last like 4 days is the first time where it just like started to feel like work. Like the first month was just so fun. It was like, this is a new system, this is a new idea, and it was just fun, and it was playing, and it was all coming together. And then in the last like 4 days, I've done nothing but like trying to implement a saving and loading system, and it's been like, bleh.
It sucks.
But the big thing that I want to learn on is what Tim said, which is, I you know, so at this point, I'm 100% sure I'm just going to not release it for free and at least sell it for a little bit, because I want to learn that side of game development as well. There's so much to game development, from like sound and music to sprite and art and just like, but I have so little to zero desire to like ever do marketing, which I'm eventually going to have to do one day, probably for a future game, and I just don't want to. So, but at least releasing it and selling it on Steam, I can at least start to kind of learn that process.
Yeah, we can talk about that a little bit. I want to open up for questions. If anyone watching now live has any questions for Stephen or for us in general, then throw them in there now. Particularly if you've like, hey, Stephen, how did you build this? Or, you know, what are you doing with that? That'd be great. Or if you've got anything you want to share about your own indie game journey that might be similar to what Stephen's been up to, then let us know in the chat now. But I think Tim's the marketing expert, and when I've listened to Tim during our marketing workshop, a lot of what we came back to was make something that people can resonate with and pops, and exactly what Tim has said, which I think is the best feedback of all. This is the sort of thing I was looking for. That's all the marketing you need. That you just need to get one or two people find it. Oh, this is what I'm looking for. And then, you know, Steam's going to give you a little bit of that organic traction. You're going to get a little bit of putting the word out there. Make sure you've got a good Steam page, and make sure that you've got, you know, some videos, and you don't have to do a lot if it's the right sort of game for people to find at this stage, I think, to just get the wheels going. So,
cool. I think, because the acceleration of this game, you don't really have time to do like a full traditional, like, you know, announcement, press release, all the stuff that comes with like, but I think if you could just email content creators, specifically content creators that have played Stacklands, I think they would all play this, dude. And I think they'd get you hundreds of thousands of views, and I think you could do well.
This is kind of off topic, but I feel like this game like even has like the potential to like be really appealing towards the speedrunning community, because I've played the game now, you know, more than anyone else, and I've like played through it, and it's actually pretty fun. Like even for me personally, playing my own game, to like see how fast I can win, it's like kind of cool to like how efficient you have to be to like put your workers on a farm and like discover the recipes, or if you can do it from memory, which is kind of another conversation.
I've played it the exact opposite way. You said it takes people 2 hours to win. I was playing 2.5 hours, and I didn't even get like barely out of the map.
I'm enjoying trying not to win it, just to like
Yeah, just chilling. It's like I'm just
Yeah.
like that's why I wish
I'd-
it had a windowed mode, because I wanted to put it on my second monitor and
Oh, yeah.
just go back and forth between boring
Yeah,
tasks.
you could definitely even tweak a few things and like make it like a fun idle game. I'm not going to do that for this game, but there's a lot of different directions that this game could go that could make it really fun.
But that's what's dangerous, though. I will
Yeah,
tell you
that's
that.
I don't want to.
That's the dangerous territory.
No,
Yeah.
I'm going to
What's
do my
your-
best to do what you guys have talked about many times on this podcast, which is really leaning into like one or two things that make this game, you find your moment and just lean into it. And I actually think that's the direction, as I've kind of discovered myself as a game developer. I have very little to no desire to go like join a team of 5 people and work on a game for 3 years. Zero desire. I actually really like Sock Pop's model. I'm considering like maybe I do that. Like basically for the next 3 years, try to do my best to release a game every few months. And just like find a moment, really lean into it, make it as fun as possible with a relatively simple thesis of what the game is, and just lean into it. Very similar to like I think how a lot of Sock Pops games are.
I've been talking about this
game. And so you should plug. If Sock Pop's listening, you should definitely PayPal me $10 because I am plugging those guys hard.
I've been preaching that kind of same thing for a long time. I have 500 hours into Battle Barn, and that was the original goal of like to keep games around that category. And honestly, after I put 500 hours into it, I'm like, I need to go smaller. 500 hours was too much. I need to go like 200 or 300. So I'm 100% on the same board with you, man. And I think, you know what? I think people are getting sick of longer games. I think some of these Ubisoft games that are 100 plus hours with 18 million side quests, I don't think people really want that.
No. Yeah,
I think a lot of people want smaller experiences.
Yeah, I wonder even how many like 18-year-olds would say that, because when I was 18 years old, I loved jumping into games like Stellaris and just like picking it apart. Like last week, or 2 weeks ago, you guys were playing Civilization on stream. I used to love games where it was like you had to hop in and you basically had to read this like 300-page rule book. I used to love games like that. Now, I can't be arsed at all to play a game like that. Like I just want to
probably age,
I think
responsibility
it's cool.
level, or
there's something for everyone, or there's someone for every game type out there. So I think maybe there's people who want long games. Maybe that's us, maybe it's not. But it's cool. Make the game that you're interested in making, and there'll be some people out there interested in it, I think. A couple of questions. So from Heckett, in terms of your plan with itch, I think it's really smart popping the game up on itch. People can very easily go grab it. There's no money conversation. It's like, here it is, play it, give me your feedback. Great. What are you going to take it off itch? Are you going to leave it there? Are you going to have it just on Steam? What's your plan for that?
Yeah, I haven't given it a ton of thought, but I mean, because obviously currently it's just for free on Steam, just for playtesting and whatnot. I think the most intuitive answer is I would just list it for the same price on itch as I would on Steam. I don't really see why not.
Yeah.
That's
Just
actually exactly what I recommend. Putting it on itch early, getting a bunch of feedback for free, and then when you launch it on Steam, just change the price on itch to make sure it's the same.
Yeah, I think that's probably what I'll do. Yeah. I haven't given it a lot of thought, but that's what I'll do.
Yeah, cool.
Your game is so pretty too. I think your itch page could be pretty.
Yeah, I haven't. Yeah, it's literally one screenshot. I haven't put any work into it at all. I just threw it up for playtesting, just for anyone that wanted. Just like I mainly threw it up just so friends could download it.
That's the marketing conversation as well. Is often we think marketing is doing ads or knocking on people's door, but I think having shiny Steam page and shiny itch page, as Tim's saying, that's the marketing part. And I think we can all do that. That's not onerous to go and see what are some good templates or who's doing it well. Oh, I need to do it like that. And I think we can all, that I think meets our indie game developer brain. It's the outreach I think people see is the scary part of marketing or the hard part of marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the big things I'm going to work on for the next 2 weeks is just making a pretty itch page and a pretty Steam page and making a trailer for the game. I don't know why, but I've always really liked Islanders trailer, where basically they have someone come on and they're like, hi, I'm this person. I just wanted to give you like a clear expectation of what this game is before you buy it for $5. I really like that approach. That's kind of what I was going to go with.
explainer trailers specifically for more complex strategy games, I think, work really well. But it worked really well for Islanders. Like I said, I can't say anything about Islanders because I was wrong about every piece of feedback I gave them. they changed the price. Yeah, like the trailer, everything.
One very simple
great.
question that I'm just reading from the chat because I keep forgetting actually people are even watching live. I'm just having a conversation with my two friends. It says, are you using one scene or a scene manager? Do you guys have any guesses?
One scene.
Yeah, it's just one scene.
It's a beautiful procedure generation. It's
just one scene. I even the main menu.
I haven't seen any loading yet from something to something. So yeah.
I like because the way the main menu is built is the main menu pops up, you click new game, and it just kind of fades into the game that was procedurally generated when you launched the game. To answer that question.
Yeah. There's another question. How much of the game did you cut out from a feature point of view? So I think you mentioned before you had something in there that you decided, like the feeding mechanic, I think you were talking about.
Actually, Rick, would it be pretty easy for you, Rick, on Slack? I sent you a message like 1 month ago I sent you a screenshot of what the game looked like a month ago. Is that pretty easy for you to pull up?
Let me have a look. It should be, if I can figure out how to computer. Oh yeah. Yep, got it. 1 minute. Download.
Yeah, Tim will actually find this probably a little fascinating too. Because a couple things that I really improved on. I've gotten a lot better at pixel art in the last 6 weeks, as you can imagine.
It looks great.
I posted a couple screenshots on Reddit asking for feedback, specifically like pixel art feedback. So you can see, like, even in the last 6 weeks, like I've just gotten better at pixel art. Like a lot, just the UI, like the bottom right bag or like the tower, just a lot of different things. You know, the pixel resolutions were all across the board. But then to answer the question,
these tiles are kind of little and detailed.
Weird. Yeah.
Can we put these side by side, or how do we? Maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of see it from what I'm looking at. I'm not sure. But so not only with pixel art, I think I've improved a lot from good feedback and whatnot. But to answer the question in chat, like I've actually cut out as much as possible. And I did that largely because of you, Tim. So thank you. Because I was listening and you were just like, pick a point, lean into it. And I was like,
you designed my perfect game now because I'm just like, I want to play it. I was so excited immediately when I saw the screenshot for the link you sent me. I was like, this is what I've been looking for. It's
so if you look at the original screenshot that I sent Rick, like the big, can you use go to the full image of that image, just like blow it up or something. So on the right side, so there's those buttons where it says like new tile, because originally the idea was that you're going to be able to buy tiles. And then it was going to be like stack lands. Originally, like on the right side, you were going to buy packs and then like get resources that were thrown onto the map. And that was the original thing I did when I was prototyping. And I was like, this just like feels wrong. So I cut that out completely, which I really like. And then I made it a game more based on like exploration. So instead of the game loop being, I need to buy more packs to get more advanced resources, to build more packs, to build more advanced resources, it was going to be a game of like, okay, well, Stacklands just has this little rectangle that you build on. Well, I'm going to make a game that you slowly explore the map to get more resources. Because I think that leans into the idea of what makes this unique and fun.
For sure.
And then the other big thing I cut out is I completely scrapped the way that food used to work. Like if you, in the old screenshot, you can see the 2 out of 4 apple in the top left, which was, you had to basically feed workers at the end of the day or else they would die, which I was just like, I just hate it. So I just scrapped it.
That was actually the only thing I ended up not figuring out. Is it said that I could feed workers, but I tried to put them on the same tile together, and nothing happened. And everything else in the game works that way, so that's what I assumed.
Yeah, right. I think that's what I should do, because like you said, everything in the game is all revolving around placing workers on tiles, and that's it.
Yeah. So it didn't occur to me until I watched you do it that I could put it on.
Yeah, like if Rick wants to show everyone right now, the way that it currently is set up is if you pluck like a cherry out of your storage and you drag it over to a non-placed worker, it'll feed the worker, but only if he's like a non-placed worker.
Oh, like
that.
And see, the other stuff stacks. So it's an inconsistent behavior with how the rest of the game works, and I think that's why it wasn't intuitive.
That should be how you feed him, like that.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I'm just gonna do that.
What's feeding him do? Why do I need to feed him?
So feed him like 3 more cherries or 2 more cherries.
Okay. Who's a good farmer? Never cherry. There we go.
Yeah.
Oh, what happened?
So if you look in the tooltip in the bottom left, he just got more health and became more proficient at working. So like he'll build stuff faster. And then if you were to feed a knight or an archer, it just basically makes them stronger. And you can see like he gets like a little star on his placement. But I think what I need to do is just make it so you put it on a tile with food and a worker. He chops at it for a minute and then he eats it.
Yeah,
I'd be okay having him on a particular tile. So I don't know what this is called here with the house or this house here, but if he has to go to the house and then I don't have any more cherries, but if I have to have him on the house tile, because he has to go home to eat. So if I don't have a house tile, or if the barbarians come and kill my house tile, or whatever the mechanic is, then like I have to go there. Well, I know I can't do that, but if there was a spot, I have to build a hut or somewhere,
like a kitchen,
or
a kitchen or
cafe.
something.
Yeah,
kitchen or cafe.
That
because it could be like, if you drag resources into the furnace, it could be kind of, it could look the same way.
It's the equivalent to the furnace. Yeah,
I think I tried to do that with the crab.
I think I'm gonna do that. I think I'm just gonna build like a kitchen or a dining room, like you just said, and then just have like the same mechanic as the furnace. And
that'd be cool because it levels them up. So it'd be cool to have a building that does that. I think that'd be cool.
Yeah. I think that makes sense.
So do we have any other questions? I'm conscious that we could talk forever with you, Stephen, but we'll see if there's any other questions or if there's anything else that we want to pick your brain on before we wrap it up today. Oh, let's go full Tim. You don't go full Tim.
Hi, everybody.
Goes full Tim. Why are we full Tim? Why is
never go full Tim?
There we go. Yeah, so I mean, from my point of view, well done, man. You've been working at it, and when you pay attention and when you watch and when you learn, you get there. I think you're a great example of that. That you haven't possessed, you don't have a degree in computer science. You haven't made 1,000 games already. You haven't gone on any journey that someone else couldn't go on themselves. It's just when you do it properly. And I think that's the whole point. If people out there are kind of having a bit of a play at making games, then that's cool. It's fun, but you're not going to get to the point where you've got a game that you could launch on Steam. And you've had some time where you've been having a bit more of a play, but when you get into it, and I've seen you, I'm going to work on pixel art, and you're like, get into pixel art, and I'm going to figure out how to build tile-based, puzzle game. You get into it and you do it. So that's a lot of the lesson we can take out of it. You don't need to be crafted from forged in the mountains of, the fires of Mount Doom or whatever it might be to become this special, Sid Meier's, he was one of a bazillion. You just need to give it a go and work on it. So thanks for sharing with us your journey about that. Yeah,
I didn't know a single line of code when I was 31 years old. So I'm 34 now and didn't pick up any programming.
At least a dozen lines of code now.
Yeah, and didn't pick up game dev until 2 years ago. So
yeah.
The thing about programming is you can just go on Stack Overflow and you don't actually have to know lines of code.
If that was only true. It's half true. Well, it's a little true. There's a couple of things. Anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you so much for even just having me on here. It's been fun. I feel like we could just talk about all different things game dev for hours and hours. So thanks for having me.
Cool. You'll have to come back on in a month or two after you've launched your game on Steam and you've been working on it for another couple of months and you've been listening to all the feedback and you've iterated and you've sold, 20,000 copies.
Yeah.
Come back on and tell us all about that part of the experience.
Tell us how you did your marketing.
Yeah, that'd be fun. And then kind of brainstorm ideas on how to go about the next game. Because the final statement that I'll say is the next game that I do, I've never once created I can't remember what it's called. It's called like a game design document where you basically spend a bunch of time crafting the game first. Because again, I'm on the other side of the spectrum where I'm just like, I have a mechanic. Open up Unity and start building. But then like halfway through the game, I'm just like, I don't even know what I'm doing. So I think the next time around, I want to really focus on trying to make like a a fun user experience from the ground up, and it'd be fun to just kind of brainstorm and bounce some ideas off of you guys.
Yep.
Cool. I'd be open
Absolutely.
for it.
Cool, man. Thanks for joining us today. I think we've answered most of the questions I found in chat. Thanks for showing us your game. And once again, we've been looking at Tilecraft. Stephen's going to be chucking it up on Steam any day now. Have a look at it. Give him lots of feedback. I'm sure he'll appreciate it a lot. We appreciate you coming and joining us today. Thank you very much, Stephen. And as always, Tim, thank you as well for being the lovely part of our duo. And we'll catch everyone next week at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Cool. Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Tuesday.